Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan.megay. I'm a North American account manager for InStat Sport, particularly in the basketball division. Today, we're joined by a great friend here, Tyler Cheng from West Virginia University men's basketball team. He's the athletic data statistician for the men's basketball team. That's kind of a mouthful, Tyler. What's up with that?
Yeah, it took me a little while to try and figure out how to spell statistician.
I think they say that the longer the title, the more you get paid. So
I wish that was true.
yeah, hopefully. Well, yeah,
Maybe
thanks again for joining us today. Appreciate it. We're gonna go over kind of how you use InStat, how it's gonna, how it benefits you guys, and feel free to just dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. Let's share my screen real quick. Um, Basically, we just started using InStat last year, halfway through the season, and we found that it's a useful program that has all of the information all on one page. Primarily, we started focusing with our lineup data. So we didn't necessarily look at lineups, like who has the best lineup, what best lineup, all this kind of stuff. We looked at it more so who on our team is more consistently in positive plus minus lineups. We also looked at our team usually plays a two big system, so we'll have Derek Culver and Oscar Sheboy on the court at the same time. So we also looked at how well we played with two bigs, how well we played with one big, and which big was better on the court by themselves. So what we did a lot was we would download this down to an Excel, and we would use filters to filter through each lineup and see how many people had positive lineups, how many people are on negative lineups. This could determine, how much, what point guard is affecting the lineups the most. We'd obviously limit the limits. The way we substitute, it's very sporadic. So as you can see, like we've used probably close to 1,000, if not more, lineup combinations, but we don't care about all these ones that are under a minute. You could probably limit even more than under a minute. So then we just count, okay, Oscar was in 30 positive lineups and 20 negative lineups, and Derek was in 27 positive lineups, but 40 negative lineups. So then all of a sudden we look at that and say, okay, well, maybe Oscar is playing better than Derek, or maybe someone else is a factor driving their play. So that's where we started with on InStat. And then we slowly started moving towards, our player data, not necessarily the first box score, because that's just more of a generic box score. But when you scroll down, it gives you so much more information, such as uncontested field goals, contested field goals, what else is in here? Pre-shooting combinations. So we looked at pick and roll, catch and shoot. We did that more so with scouting opponents. So we wanted to know which way were they coming off the pick and roll, who is getting the most catch and shoot opportunities, to try and find out who really drives the other team's offense and whether or not they're a catch and shoot team. We found that there's a lot more catch and shoot teams, which means you need to put an emphasis on, running them off the line and making sure they don't get easy buckets in the paint afterwards. So you have to have help side there. But at the same time, we don't want certain players or certain teams to just be able to catch and shoot anytime they want. So another thing we would look at is play types. And this goes back to especially scouting. Catch and shoot opportunity is something that we really focused on because, again, we want to limit our opponents' catch and shoot shots because usually those are the shots that are easy to make and usually threes. So being a defensive first team at West Virginia, we really wanted to focus on running people off the line, limiting transitions, and obviously going into analytics, protect the paint, no easy layups, but also don't let them just have wide open threes all the time. We play a very hard-nosed style at West Virginia, and we take things away. We try and make it hard as possible. So sometimes we get back cut. Sometimes when we press, we give up easy layups in the press break. But we find that the more turnovers we have, the more pressure we put on people, the harder it is for them later on in the game, later on down the stretch, that they're going to be exhausted. And we run 13 players deep, so we don't necessarily have that problem of being tired all the time. Another thing we focused on just this off season was the shot chart. So we look at each individual player and we sat down with them and talked about, okay, what are our expectations for you? What shots are you taking? What shots are you struggling with? What positions are you struggling with? So let me just look at this. So if we went with Taz right here, we sat down with him and said, okay, so this is your shot chart for the entire year. Clearly, this is an area of concern. Yes, you are a guard, but at the same time, you can't be finishing around the rim at a 20% rate. So we need to look at how you're finishing, what's the issue of your finishing? And we're just trying to get to the bottom of, is it your finishing moves need work, your touch around the basket need work? Do you need to start doing floaters over layups? Is our post not hitting the middleman enough so it's creating an advantage for you? Is our lane too clogged? Because we do play with two bigs, that can become a factor as well. And then we'll look around and say, okay, well, in the corners, you were a combined 1 for 10. So maybe he needs more reps in the corners. We need to look at, is the shots he getting from the corner catch and shoot shots? Are they off the dribble? There's so many different instances. So we would sit down with him and then click and watch and see what type of shots he's getting from the corner. And then hopefully we can put that into a workout for him so that he knows, okay, well, that was a catch and shoot shot very easily. So basically most of them are going to be catch and shoot shots because it is from the corner three. So right off the bat, we can look at, okay, a lot of times he's sliding down from the top to the wing, or from the wing to the corner. We want to make him start practicing, instead of just standing stationary catch and shoot, we're going to start him from the wing, slide him down, and then catch and shoot. So that way he gets more game-like reps as opposed to just spot shooting, which is everyone's favorite. Go around 5 spots, 10 makes each spot, and move on to the next thing. So this is how we've used InStat so far. What we'll also do is we send all of this stuff to the guys so that they can go and click and look at each individual spot, and our coaches will sit down with them and break it down with them. So what I did was, where's my tag list? Here it is. I went through all of our makes and misses around the rim. So we're looking at more so like this area right here. And I tagged them left and right, because that's the one thing I don't think that InStat necessarily has around the rim. What side of the rim are they finishing on? But down here, they also have make shots, miss shots, foul shots, and they just break it down. You can break it down by opponent, by player, assisted by time. So there's so many different ways to break it down that I just wanted to make sure that we covered all the bases. And so the one thing that our coaches especially were interested in are, is Derek Culver better finishing on the left side of the rim than he is on the right side of the rim? So I went through and tagged every single one of our makes and misses, as well as I tagged all of our guards going off the bounce and catch and shoot. For that, I only did the shot type. I probably should have done makes and misses in hindsight, but I decided to do that after. But I only did it for our guards that were coming back, because in college guys can only play max 4 years, and sometimes it's only 2-3 years. So there wasn't necessarily a point of tagging our players that are already leaving. So we wanted to focus on guys who are actually staying here and making sure that we know, what type of shots are they getting? Are they getting more shots off the bounce and catch and shoot? So what I'll do is, okay, so say I want to look at Evan Matthews. So these are all of his, makes around the basket, as well as his catch and shooting off the bounce. And then very quickly I could just go, okay, how many catch and shoots did he have? and then you can just count the number. Actually, you don't have to count the number. Sorry, the number is right up here. So he had 60 catch and shoot situations this past season, and he had 16 off the bounce situations. Now, this is not necessarily in the paint. This is just on the perimeter and in the mid range. So right off the bat, I already know that he needs to work more on catching and shooting, because that is what primarily he did to try and score. Also with that, we look at our bigs. Where's Derek? So Derek, so he had 141 makes and misses both left and right side. But if I just want to look at his left side makes, right off the bat, I know that he had 38 makes compared to his 35 misses. So it's relatively about 50%. And then we look at his right side, he's at 30 makes, 38 misses. So right off the bat, I know he's worse on the right side than he is on the left side. So now maybe this offseason we spend more time working with his right hand as opposed to his left hand. So that way teams don't necessarily only overshadow or overplay his left hand. Because everybody scouts in the NCAA, so they all know, you know, are you better going left? Are you better going right? Which way they should force you? What's your go-to post move? So this is a way for us to break down players and know which way they're going to go, and how we can make them a little bit more unpredictable. So then we also looked at his shot chart, and we found that the shot chart is the primary thing that we're using. Obviously, we're going to keep diving into it. We've only been in this program for about a year. But we found the shot chart's the most useful, as it gives you a full picture of where players are scoring. Like right off the bat, you can see that Derek's 50% from this little mid-range short corner on the left side, and he's only 8% on the right short corner. So right off the bat, we know that he needs to improve his mid-range game from the top and the wing, just because it's combined 38%, not 38%, 4 for 23. So it just gives our players a visual to be able to look at it and say, okay, I need to improve my mid-range jumper here because it's very sporadic. We're not going to look at this three because that's an outlier. He's not a stretch big. But I also need to work on around the basket, because 39% is not good enough, especially in a high major NCAA Division I basketball. I mean, when you look at the NBA, they're expecting about 1.2 points around the basket, and he's only, I think, at 0.78, which it just falls short when you compare that to someone like Azubuike, who was the standard of bigs in the Big 12 this past year. He's shooting 63%. Now, obviously, he's on the high end, if not the best big in the Big 12, but we feel that there's no reason that our players can't strive to be maybe not quite as efficient, because I think he had something like, of his 275 shots, 87 of them were dunks, and he only missed 10 dunks all year. So obviously when you look at Derek, he had 233 shots in there, but he only had 11 dunks. So obviously we don't expect Derek to have all of a sudden jump 100 dunks in one season, but at the same time, we do want him to be more efficient inside that paint, because we are a, hard-nosed rebounding team. We score a lot off of offensive rebounds, and we do post up a lot and do a lot of high-low actions. So we want to be efficient in the paint, because we can't be missing easy two-footers, even if there is somebody on us. So another thing that we did, go back here. We sent every single player their own shot chart and like their own InStat page, which you can invite players up here. And we found that very helpful, because yeah, it's nice for our coaches to sit down with our players and talk about, okay, this is your shot chart, this is where we need you to improve, but we don't have necessarily unlimited time to just go and sit down with these guys and go through every single shot for them, so they can go through their own shot chart on their own time, because all of these guys want to get better. We all know they want to get better, but they don't always necessarily know how to get better. So by sitting down with them and explaining to them and showing this initially, and then letting them wander through their own page and figure out, what am I doing good? What am I doing bad? What do I need to improve upon? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And they should already know this stuff or have a general idea of it. But at the same time, they need to be able to still go and explore more on their own. And maybe they make a realization like, oh, you know what? I thought I was pretty good at floaters, but it turns out, I'm not. I don't shoot that well. Like if I look at Taz, he was over 2 on floaters. Now we don't really want our players shooting floaters necessarily. We just don't like that type of shot. But maybe if the guy works on it, it's going to be better and he's not going to have a problem. So we let our guys kind of go, and if they want to compare, they can do that. We haven't necessarily dove into this, but I think if we can compare, so put that in here. There it is. They can go and compare their numbers to other teammates if they want to go put another player in there that's similar to them. So something like Austin Reeves at Oklahoma. I spelled that wrong. There he is. So now they can go look at someone similar to them on a different team, on the same team, and then just go down and how different they are. Now, obviously, Austin Reeves played more minutes than Taz did, but that's neither here nor there for this. But they can look at how their numbers stack up to other people around the league. You can change the season. So we haven't gotten fully into that, but we plan on getting more and more into this. But this is also another good breakdown for them. They said, okay, most of my shots are coming from catch and shoot, but I expect to be able to, break it down in isolations. Taz is one of our better, if not our best, isolation player on the team, and we expect him to be able to break down people at a higher rate than 9.9%. But he is at, that being said, he is at 1.07 points per possession, which is pretty good for our standards, considering we don't isolate very much. One thing that I do focus on, especially in the NCAA, is we don't necessarily like to just focus on the whole season, just because the variance of competition can vary. So we'll focus a lot more so on conference schedule only. We do break it down where we'll add in bigger games, like Ohio State was a big game for us. Pittsburgh's a big game for us since that's a rivalry game. St. John's, those types of games. We'll throw those ones in there, but we don't want necessarily, if it's a blowout, to include that game, because we don't want our players to be padding their stats in a way. Not that they're doing that. We want them to win the game. We want them to compete hard, but we don't want them to throw off the numbers too much, where we look at our lineup data and say, just give me a second. Whenever it loads. And we'll do this for negatives too. We don't want them necessarily to have a high amount of negatives just because they, we got blown out one game. But so like this lineup of Jermaine, Emmett, Deuce, Oscar, and Sean was a plus 17 in 14 minutes total, which is great. But, how much of that 14 minutes was against a team where we blew them out by 20, 30 points? So we don't want to have that into our factors, because this might help dictate our lineups going forward. Not necessarily like we're going to all of a sudden start this lineup instead of our normal starting lineup, but we know this combination is a good combination for us compared to something down here, which was Jermaine, Emmett, Deuce, Oscar, and Taz. Now, obviously, we want to go in there and look at, how did they get to minus 18 versus how did they get to plus 17? So that's when we'll look at not necessarily the main stuff like points and all that kind of stuff, but we'll look at things like I think there's a field goal rate, like how many field goals you're giving up, how many you're attempting. It's in here somewhere.
You hit show opponent stats.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so there we go. So now you can look at, are we just outscoring the other team, or are they just struggling on offense? Those are two factors that obviously come into play when we're looking at our lineup data and how we're going to evaluate whether, we don't want to we're not going to get into a run and gun style of trading baskets with teams, because we're not going to win that way. We focus a lot on defense and making sure we stop the other team from scoring, sometimes which overtakes our offense at times, but that's okay to an extent. Obviously, we want to improve our offense, but our main focus has always been defense under Coach Hugs. So that little opponent is going to help us more than it's going to than just necessarily looking at how our alliance are scoring. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, so when it comes to scouting opponents, we do a similar thing to how we address our own team. So if we wanted to look at someone like Kansas, there. The first thing we'll do is we all know Kansas. We see them 2 times a year, sometimes 3 if we play them in the conference tournament. They're the team that usually wins the Big 12 conference. So we know them very well. We know their players. Their coach has been there forever, so we know which systems they're going to run and which plays they like to go to. But at the same time, we still want to look at and see if there's anything different than normal. So this past year, they usually play like a 2 big, similar to our style where they're going high-low, throwing it inside. And they still did that, but they went away from the 2 big system because they found that the other big was helping a lot on Azubuike. And there's a big drop off from their 5 to their 4 necessarily. So now all of a sudden they put a smaller 4 in there, spread out the court, and there's less help on Azubuike. So now they can post up more. They can get catch and shoot situations by going inside out, and they hit the roller not as much, but that's because Azubuike is more of a post up big as opposed to a pick and roll guy. He can be though. So this is where we'll first look for when scouting opponents, and then we'll look at their lineups. For the most part, nobody's going to have lineups like ours where we have over 1,000 lineups, and usually teams are very consistent with who they play because most teams are only playing max 8 or 9 guys, and that's probably on the higher side because probably 1 or 2 of those guys only plays a few minutes per game. So we can really focus in on players like Dodson, Azubuike, Agbaji, Miles Garrett. We can focus in on those kind of guys that are actually that really make their team go. And then we can break down those players more and focus on, okay, is Dodson more of a left driver or right driver? Is he more of a catch and shoot guy? Is he a slasher? Who's creating all their plays and who's coming off the pick and roll for them the most? So this really helps us break down each opponent because everyone watches film, and it's nice to be able to see, okay, my eyes tell me he goes left this amount of times, he goes right this amount of times. But the way this works is, where's DeMond Dotson? This just allows you to have more of a visual and see the actual numbers. How often does he go left? How often does he go right? Because maybe, when you go to Synergy and you download the clips and you see him drive right 4 times and left once, you're like, okay, yeah, he's for sure a right driver. But then when you look at the actual numbers of his pick and rolls, okay, he actually goes about pretty even right and left on pick and rolls. So And also, I think you can go catch and drives. So you can see where he's getting from when he gets a catch and drive. And then you'd obviously just click in here and see, okay, is he finishing more on the right? Is he finishing on more on the left? And it's just an easier way to condense these numbers and get it more simplified and actually show you how they're scoring and more accurately show you what they like to do, as opposed to just trying to pick up on trends through watching constant game film. Yeah, let me see if I'm missing anything else. That is pretty much it that we've used it. Obviously, there's so much more on InStat that we probably haven't learned about yet. I'm slowly still plowing through all that InStat has to offer. We really like the tagging system. Basically, all we did to tag our makes and misses for right and left is we went to our shot chart for our entire team, made sure that we just, what I did was I went through and made sure that it was just made shots at the beginning and then just missed shots. And so we click on the area we want to do. Obviously, we're doing in the paint because we're going left and right side in the paint. External view.
Great energy.
And then what I did here was I set up my tags. And then, as you see, the last ones I did were right and left side miss, but they were already saved right here. The only reason why I unclicked them was because I wanted to make sure that I could use the same tag of right and left. Just R and L. And then I'll switch these guys to something else so I could use them. And that way I'm only focusing on right and left side, and I just go through and play the clip. Okay, it's Derek Culver and he's on the left side. I already know it's going to be a make, so I can click L, pops up left side, Derek Culver. And it's just as simple as that. And that way it makes going through, I think, 400 some odd makes, 447 makes. All of a sudden I'm doing that in maybe an hour because I just started to learn how to tag and really go through all the tagging. But probably by the end of it, it'll take me maybe 30 minutes, as it did yesterday with all of the missed shots. Now, obviously, I have to go back through and tag whether or not they made or missed their catch and shoot shots. But it's really nice that they have it so that I can make it a neutral, or I can make it a green or red based on the positive or negative outcome. Where is it? Positive or negative outcome. And then you can set how long you want the duration before and after the play, and then set your hotkey. And you can tag anything. I know I watched some of these InStat, these other people present on InStat, and they were tagging, different moves that they liked. They went through like NBA players and their own league players, because a lot of them were international, and tagging different players and different teams and what they liked, what they didn't like, and had hundreds of playlists that just broke down each skill, whether it was a floater, a runner, different finishes around the rim, different ways to get their jump shots. And they put them all together in playlists, and they'll send them to guys. I know you can add pictures to the actual screen. I haven't gotten into that yet. But yeah, I think that's everything that we do at West Virginia so far. Like I said, there's still so much more for us to explore on this page, especially on our main site, team page. So I'm excited to look into this more and really break down our team and understand how our team operates. And the biggest thing for us is that this is simple enough for our coaches to understand. Yes, it can be a little bit overwhelming because there is a lot of numbers, but there's definitions on every single header. And what I found is, for the most part, our coaches don't necessarily want, the calculations that go into it, the definitions, the breakdown. They just want to know what's the problem that you're seeing, and they'll come up with a potential way to fix it. So right off the bat, I can say, okay, well, I don't think we're getting enough catch and shoot opportunities. And if we are, we're not scoring at a higher enough rate compared to someone like Kansas. So we're only at 0.79 points per possession. And they're at, I think, they're at 0.98. So obviously we need to figure out a way to increase our catch and shoot points per possession. Now, would I use points per possession with them? Probably not, but I'll give them a percentage of what is our percentage on catch and shoots, and who's getting the shots. But you want to keep it as simple as possible, because a lot of times coaches don't have the time for you to explain to them, like, okay, this is how you calculate points per possession. This is how you calculate expected points per shot. They don't want all that. They want simple, like, who's shooting the best, who's shooting the worst, what's the problem, and they'll come up with a way how to fix it. You don't necessarily always have to come up with that way. Sometimes you will, but I found the more you keep it simple for your coaches, the better. Especially with our program, we're not necessarily a big analytics program. For the most part, I don't say the word analytics because it becomes a buzzword for them and they automatically tune out. So, but if you just say, these are the numbers, these are the stats. They like stats. Everyone knows a box score. They all read box scores. So if you keep it simple and you really focus on, this is the problem, here's a way to get better, they'll always decide whether or not they can find a different way to make it better. But you can always offer that, and all of a sudden you gain more credibility as you keep bringing more and more things to them. Obviously, don't overwhelm them, but bring things that are an absolute concern, that you feel that would really affect winning and losing in the program. So that's basically everything I have.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That was really, really good. I was really impressed with everything you went through. I wrote a couple notes down. I think starting off with a presentation, the fact that you guys organize your lineup so efficiently by targeting players who are in the most common positive lineups, players who are in the most common negative lineups. I think it's a great way to utilize the platform. And going into that player development part as well, being able to show players with a visual, which I think we're all visual learners, right? We all, are able to learn a lot quicker when we can see it with our own eyes, and to show them, where they're struggling on the court to shoot, corner threes, for example. It's just an easy, tangible way for them to get better and what to work on. And then the fact that you went even deeper with your tagging, your unique tagging, I think was awesome. Going, finishing with the left hand or the right hand or the left side of the boot hoop or the right side of the hoop. To be really unique in the type of tags that you're going after is, I think, is really impressive. I was blown away for sure. And it seems like, you were able to utilize a lot of different parts of the platform. And do you think that really helps you save a lot of time and be a little more efficient?
I mean, absolutely, it saves us a ton of time just because everything is right there in front of us. It's not like we have to go to a billion different pages. Obviously, you can see I have for the most part, I had all my tabs open that I wanted to talk about. So it's very easy to open up multiple people's tabs and just have it there when you want to go reference it again. So I don't necessarily have to go scrolling through something like Synergy where you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it's just a whole page of numbers. This breaks it down where if you even just look at the players tab, so it has, the box score, then it has your efficiency data, then it has your pre-shooting combinations, and then it has your defense. All of a sudden it's broken down so much more where I don't have to necessarily be searching for a number. Or, one thing that we looked at was how many dunks did Azubuike get? And that's just as simple as clicking, shot type, which is on a player one, not a team one, shot type, and then clicking dunks. And right there, instead of me having to go and download all of his shots from the past year around the rim or all of his layups / dunks, and then go through each individual one and count them, I can just click dunks right away, and all of a sudden I know exactly how many dunks he got or how many layups he got. Now, obviously, if I want to go and understand, left side, right side, how is he getting those layups? Is it a post up or anything like that? I can click on that and still get the film. But it just saves me so much more time when a coach asks, does he drive left or does he drive right? Does he shoot off the bounce or does he catch and shoot? It's just such an easy way for us to better understand players without having to watch hours and hours and hours of film. We start going to watch that film, but we can watch it in a quicker way, in a more cut up way than if we were just watching film and trying to manually count everything.
Right. Yeah, I think saving time, especially in the heat of the season, is just it's a game changer for you guys. And I can imagine that your coaching staff, they're caught up in the season too, and they want all this information as fast as possible. So to be able to cut that time down is, I'm sure, really helpful. And do you think that it's the fact that InStat has a tagging tool within the platform, being able to draw on the film within the platform to be able to have the lineup statistics as well, all under one roof, like that makes a huge difference for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was watching Tim Arns's InStat video, when he said he could draw pictures on it and add little like words to it, so that way he's basically can coach these guys by creating a playlist, drawing on the pictures, tagging things, and then he could just send the playlist to his players, and all of a sudden they can watch it, and instead of trying to guess what he's looking for, like, okay, maybe the coaches are saying we need to post up, more in the paint. Maybe they're saying I need to sell opposite more. It takes away the guesswork, because now I can say, okay, look, this is focusing on this area right here. You could have caught the ball in the paint right here. You could have faked this way. You have to make sure you catch and look. Maybe this guy's going to dive. Maybe this guy's cutting behind. There's just so many more options that you can actually put on the film, because you can't always bring in your players and sit down with them and watch every single game with them, because players have practice, they have study hall, they have class, they have weights, then they have to have their own free time, then they have to sleep and still eat. Meanwhile, you as a coach have to, scout opponents, recruit players, and just manage everything else that goes on and do all of the booster and donor stuff. So you don't necessarily have the time to just always sit down with your players for 2-3 hours at a time, times 12, 13 players, and really break down their game with them. So by having the ability to tag and create playlists and basically add things to the video without having to have some fancy video software download on your computer, all of a sudden it changes how we can coach these guys and how we can give information to our players without necessarily having to have them present. Now, if they have questions, obviously you can encourage them to talk to you about it and give you calls. But at the same time, it takes away that step. Now, obviously, you still want to call your guys in there to build rapport and talk to them and really break it down with them. But it's just a simple way to get that information out to them, especially if it's such a little thing as, instead of catching the ball here, you're going to catch the ball here. And that just opens up so much more for you.
For sure. Absolutely. And we kind of talked about how it would look kind of mid-season for you guys. So how do you think you'll use InStat, right in the heat of the middle of the season conference play? Like, how is it going to fit into your workflow?
So we spoke when I showed this to our coaches this past off season, because it was more of a auxiliary staff thing that we used to supplement our scouting, to supplement our to understand our team, and then we'll offer up suggestions. When I showed it to the staff, they said, okay, we're going to look at the shot charts, off season with our players, halfway through. So probably after all the non-conference games. And then we're going to look at about halfway through the conference games. So that way our players know, what shots are you taking? How is it looking? Where do you need to improve upon? And then with the select matches game, we can show them, okay, like, look, this is what you had all in conference or non-conference and select all those games. And then this is where you are in the first half of conference. And all of a sudden they can see, okay, yeah, my numbers from the right wing mid got better from non-conference to conference. Now, obviously, it's an imperfect comparison just because non-conference can be easier than conference at times, but at the same time, they can still see whether they're improving or getting worse and seeing what the difference is. So they can look at their shots, they can look at their hard numbers. So that's how I feel like we're going to use it. Plus, we're going to incorporate more of it into our scouting when we're looking at other teams' players and other teams' trends. I mean, a lot of teams don't use a ton of lineups like we do. So we can look at, okay, who is their best lineup and what lineups do we need to make sure we capitalize? Maybe they bring in a guy for 2-3 minutes and that lineup is usually like a -8. We need to make sure that we have a lineup on there that's going to capitalize and we can attack those guys and what are their weaknesses. And it just breaks it down in such a way that it there's no more, it limits the guesswork in what we have to do. And I think with regards to scouting and mid-season player development, I mean, are we going to change anything dramatically on these guys? No, but at the same time, we can help them draw their attention to an area that they might not know, because a lot of these guys would just keep going with their same workout routines, but maybe they need to be focusing on a different area that they're not necessarily thinking about.
For sure. Yeah, I think that the fact that it's kind of it's a two-pronged way of utilizing the platform, be able to, on an individual player basis for player development, the fact that you can just isolate and specify which games you want to focus on and how that's going to apply to the shot chart. Like, let's say you won, like you mentioned, Pitt and Ohio State being big game non-conference games for you guys, you can just focus on those games. Or if you wanted to focus on just conference games, to be able to isolate that shot chart just for those games, I think is really helpful. And then the fact that you can bring in the scouting part of it too. You can see, what your opponents are doing and which lineups are good for them, which are bad for them, and when you need to, when you need to attack those specific, those bad lineups. But that's awesome. I think you mentioned a lot of great things that can be beneficial to your individual players as well as your coaches. And so what would you say, like, to, if to another college team that was watching, or what would you say, how should they use InStat, or why should they, I don't know, purchase the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to using InStat and having all these numbers available to you, it gets to a point where there is so much information that there's no way you could use it all, because it'd be paralysis by analysis. So I think if you're going to be using this, you have to make sure that you know what you're looking for, you know what your coaches want, and this is a way that you can get that information quickly to them, because sometimes they don't know what they want. Sometimes, it'll be mid-practice and they'll say, hey, can you get me this number? And instead of having to go through and look at every single clip, or, sometimes making up a number, you can come to InStat and look directly at, okay, like, they wanted to know this guy's field goal percentage or this guy's catch and shoot percentage. You can just come here and have all the information at your fingertips. And it just simplifies everything in a way that there's no more guesswork. It cuts out that manual labor that you would normally have to do. And it just makes things so much simpler, and you can actually see in tangible numbers for how these guys operate and how they do it. So I just feel like this is a way for college teams, especially, that have so much going on at all the time, that it cuts down the time on trying to accumulate these numbers, and it gives you data that you definitely want and you know that you want, but maybe data that you also didn't know you want. Because if you had asked our coaches whether or not we'd look at lineup data, they'd say, no, we don't have any time for that. We don't need it. It's useless. But then all of a sudden we break it down in the way where we look at, how many positive lineups are they in, how many negative lineups they're in. Yes, plus minus is not a perfect statistic, but at the same time, all of a sudden we can find trends like, this player is in a lot of positive lineups, this player is in a lot of negative lineups. Why is that? So now they can do a deeper dive on something that they didn't know was necessarily an issue. And it shines a light on things that you might not think about, especially during a season. For the most part, coaches always think, well, we're terrible. We can always be better. Because you can always be better. But this way, instead of just saying we're terrible, I don't know why we're terrible necessarily, or I think this is the reason why, this gives you more of a concrete reason of, this is why we're struggling. This is how we can get better. And sometimes you find those correlations, like, we're not a good 3-point shooting team at West Virginia necessarily. As you can see, no one even close to 40%. That being said, we're the best offensive rebounding team in the country. But you can't be an offensive rebounding team if you don't miss shots. Mm-hmm. So it goes hand in hand, and it's unfortunate. Obviously, we definitely give up more offensive rebounds if we're going to make 40% of all our threes, but that's just, unfortunately, that's not how it's happening. But we hope that we can at least increase them by 3 to 4%. Like, there's no reason why we should be shooting 23 and 27% from the corners. There's no reason for that. So we need to figure out, why are we shooting that low and how can we improve that? But we wouldn't necessarily know that without looking at shot charts. Mm-hmm. And I think our coaches are starting to really embrace it. And I think college programs around the country should start embracing shot charts, which I'm sure most have, but really breaking it down for the players to also look at, because you can only tell a player so much before they'll eventually start tuning you out if you're just constantly on them. But if you show them the numbers and you let them explore and let them understand the game, because most of these guys know their game and know how they play, but if you give them the access to it, they want to get better. They're going to look at this kind of stuff and they're going to explore on their own and figure out, oh, okay, the difference between this dribble pull up and this dribble pull up was, I was leaning back too far or I was off balance. Now they can go break down their own game as well. So it's a way to empower your athletes to get better while also looking at your own program in a reflective way.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way to finish off this webinar, is that I might get a t-shirt that says paralysis is analysis. I think being able to sort through all this information, I think pure basketball coaches, like you said, they don't like all this information. They don't like the word analytics as a buzzword for them. But to be able to sort through this information and pick out key bits of information that you can translate to them and have it be an actionable piece of information where they can, either get better from a player development standpoint or get an edge on the court in a scouting perspective. I think it makes a huge difference. And I think that's just a great way to end it. So, well, thanks again, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate y'all having me. And if you guys have any questions, you can email me anytime. It's gtcheng@mail.wvu.edu. Shoot me any questions you guys would like. But no, thank you guys for having me on. This has been great. I really love this program.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Tyler. I hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Tyler.